Okay, we're continuing with my review notes of a life science and cell biology in a nutshell. We were learning about the cell membrane. The cell membrane consists of a bilayer of phospholipid molecules, which we learned about previously. So if this is the cell, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, around the nucleus, the extracellular fluid outside the cell. We have a zoomed in picture diagram of a cell membrane consisting of the molecules of the membrane itself. So the main part of the membrane is the phospholipids molecules, which make up the bilayer. So the phospholipid again has a hydrophilic head, a hydrophobic tail consisting of fatty acid chains, and uh, phospholipid. Um, the hydrophobic head has a phosphate group, an alcohol group, which can be one of four kinds of polar groups, which we mentioned previously. So, and the glycerol backbone connecting the hydrophilic and hydrophobic parts of the molecule. So, there's two fatty acid chains in the hydrophobic part. One is a saturated straight chain of hydrocarbons. The other second tail is an unsaturated chain of hydrocarbons with a kink, which is a double bond between two hydrocarbon groups, making it unsaturated. So this kink causes more fluidity in the membrane because the phospholipid molecules do not stack together as rigidly. So the other molecules found in the membrane, besides the bilayer, which is two monolayers on top of each other of the phospholipid molecules with the hydrophobic tails facing one another, the hydrophilic heads on the side of the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell facing the soluble fluid, polar sides with the water soluble sides. So you have in the membrane also channels, protein channels. Some of these proteins connect with the cytoskeleton filaments. So there's proteins on the surface called peripheral proteins. There's integral proteins that also helix proteins that go all the way across the membrane. So these channels serve to bring molecules into and outside the cell that are unable to cross through the thick membrane because they may be polar ions or just big molecules that need to go through these channels. So also used for as receptors and for signaling pathways are other molecules such as glycoproteins, and which are proteins with a sugar group attached or a carbohydrate. Um, so so the membrane is basically made up of proteins, fat molecules or these lipids, carbohydrates, as well as steroid molecules, which are similar to lipids, such as cholesterol, which insert themselves between the phospholipid molecules, orienting themselves with the polar head of the cholesterol molecule that aligns itself with the polar head of the phospholipids, and the nonpolar part of the cholesterol, which are the four cyclic rings, align with the nonpolar part of the phospholipid. So here you can see the four different alcohol groups, which are the polar heads of which one of which could be a polar head on the phospholipid molecule, depending on the nature of the membrane itself. Also, depending on whether it's the outer membrane facing the outside of the cell, an extracellular fluid, or if it's on the inner monolayer of the membrane facing the cytosol, the inside of the cell. So the four different alcohol groups, which are bound to the phosphate group. So these are the different types of the phospholipids. So all of them have in common the phosphate group, the glycerol backbone, and the two fatty acid tails. So the only thing that varies between these four types of phospholipids, called phosphatidyl ethanoamine, phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, and single myelin, are the alcohol groups bound at the polar end of the phospholipid molecule. So you can see those there. So phosphatidylcholine and single myelin have a little more bulky head group, polar head group, with three CH3 groups attached to essential nitrogen, and then two CH2 groups and an oxygen. While phosphatidylethanolamine and phosphatidylserine are just the oxygen, this CH2. This one has another CH2 and an NH3 group, and this one has a carboxyl group and an NH3 as well. So here we have a cholesterol, which is a type of steroid molecule, embedded itself between the phospholipid molecules, shown the structure formula of cholesterol with the polar head group in red, and the nonpolar section. And these are the cyclic rings. So this is how it aligns itself in the membrane, the monolayer. So due to one of the fatty acid tails being kinked and unsaturated, the membrane is a little more fluid and spread out, as you can see here, rather than being more closer together and not that flexible. So together, the four phospholipids constitute more than half the mass of lipids in most membranes. So only phosphatidylserine carries a net negative charge, and the other ones are neutral molecules, the whole. The other three carry one positive and one negative charge, making them neutral. So that's again what the membrane looks like, with its embedded molecules interacting with it, and the four kinds of phospholipids. Phosphatidylserine is right here. That's the only negative molecule. So phosphatidylaminoamine and phosphatidylserine are in the inner monolayer generally, so the negativity is in the inner monolayer, while single myelin and phosphatidylcholine are usually in the outer monolayer. That's usually how they're set up. So thank you guys. I'll see you in the next video.